Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be exploring the build I've been using a lot recently in my own time that I think is incredibly versatile and super strong. Now I have coined this build the Elemental Samurai, as we will be making use of all sorts of status effects to exploit the weaknesses of different enemies and bosses. Now my last build guide I showed off a super powerful faith magic build that causes a lot of explosions. So if faith builds or burning people alive is more your thing, I'll link that down below for you to go watch. So let's get into this build. There will be timestamps down below so you can skip around if you like. I will be showcasing everything that I'm making use of and where you can go and pick it up from. Now just before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about a new game I've been playing, and I'm of course talking about the sponsor of this video, Mech Arena. Now, Mech Arena is a free third-person mech shooter where you can collect, upgrade, and use giant mechs in a bunch of different modes, both solo and team-based. Now the game is playable on Android, iOS, and PC. Now I definitely prefer to play it on PC, but it is super fun to be able to play this on my iPad while I'm laying in bed relaxing. Now since I've started playing Mech Arena, I have collected a bunch of different mechs that all have different playstyles and abilities, and my favorite is probably the Kill Shot, which has a super fast glass cannon type of playstyle, and I can zip around between cover and then use my plasma cannons to absolutely rinse people. Now my most played mech is actually the Lancer, because you can unlock it fairly early in the game, and it does have the ability to jump really high and take high ground, which I think is super useful in this game, and it is very powerful against other noobs in the lower divisions. Thirdly, I can't forget about my MD mech. This one looks more like a droid from Star Wars rather than a mech, and I run it with some insanely long-range homing javelins, and it does come with a healing ability which I think is super crazy strong when your team is somewhat coordinated. Now the Biohazard Brawl is the event that is running throughout May, which features a fierce deathmatch and free-for-all tournament in some grimy industrial themed maps, and the new big reward is the Eclipse. It's a legendary scout mech that really does pack a punch. It comes with some awesome stealth abilities that can make itself immune to debuffs like EMPs. Now as for the weapons, Mech Arena is releasing a new epic assault weapon that spits out rapid fire destruction called the Fusion Cannon. Not to mention the new close quarters legendary mech pilot Neve, and if cosmetics are your thing, you'll be really happy to hear that there is a new hazmat skin that you can pick up in game, as well as the new Dust Devil skin available in this season's Battle Pass. Now don't forget, this game is completely free to play on Android, iOS, and PC right now, and you can use my personal link or scan my QR code to get bonuses worth $30. Now we're talking 1 Rocket Mortar 6, 1 Amateur Crate, and 1 skin to help kickstart your game. And if you're really quick, I'll be accepting friend requests, so feel free to add me and we can play together. Seriously, a massive thank you to Mech Arena for sponsoring the channel, and let's get into it. So to become an Elemental Samurai yourself, you will of course need the weapon. Now we are running with a Keen Naga Kiba. Now this is essentially a really long two-handed katana that we'll be slicing and dicing with. Now you do only need the one. We're not going to be dual wielding, which is really good news for those of you who are still in their first playthrough. Now the easiest way to get your hands on this bad boy is just to travel north of the Murkwater Cave right here on screen, where you will find Bloody Finger Hunter Yura. You're just going to kill him and you will get the weapon. Now you know when you go and ask your mum for Moonveil and she says no, we have Moonveil at home. Well, she's talking about our Naga Kiba, because we're basically creating a discount Moonveil with the Unsheath Ash of War. Now this will allow us to output large amounts of damage in chunks instead of having to go and hit combos. This means we can get in some quick damage when we want, and we'll have plenty of time to avoid all the different attacks or even reposition mid-fight. Now to get your hands on the skill, you want to travel east from the first step side of Grace, not very far from where you start, and you can get it after killing a teardrop scarab at the south side of this lake. Now before I get into the armor, here are the stats that I am rolling with. I know a lot of you guys who watch the videos are still relatively low level, so I'm on my other character for this video, which I've decided to keep at a level 150, just to help you guys choose which stats to prioritize. So I'm making making sure I have a decent amount of vigor with 50. I'm going with 30 mind, 30 endurance, and you will need at least 18 strength to wield the Nagakiba. Of course, it is an A tier dex weapon, so you're going to pump that dex up as high as possible. So I'm sitting at 75 dex with a +5 from a talisman that I'll show off later. Intelligence, faith, and arcane, they're not super important, so I've left them at 10, which is the default. Now on my higher level characters, which I might show gameplay of later in the video, I have most of my stats at around 60, but the only real benefit I'm getting there is the increased stamina and health, as most of these stats don't come into play at all really. Now by far the most vital part of the entire build, of any build really, the drip. Now I do usually prefer to look cool over wearing something functional. High health and poise builds are usually the exception, of course, but this time we're obviously rolling with that Ronin look, so you can mix and match stuff however you like, but if you've got most of the gear in the game like I do, this is what I like to roll with. Now we're going to have the iron casa for the helm, the Ronin's armor for the chest, the eccentrics manchettes, and the Kaiden trousers. Now the helm is of course the most important part if you're going to go for that Ronin look, but you can wear whatever you like. It literally doesn't matter. I just think this looks sick. If you want to look cool like me, go with this this armor here. Now the talismans I'm rocking currently, we've got the prosthesis wearer heirloom, which raises my dex from 75 to 80. It's what I was talking about earlier. It's a crazy boost. Now to get this bad boy, you want to come here on the map where you can start Gowry's side quest. You're going to go and finish that, and then return to Millicent to receive the talisman. Now I will link a guide to that side quest down below, so check that out if you need help with it. Next up, I'm going to be running the Shard of Alexander. Now I do use this talisman in most of my builds because it is crazy good, what can I say? Now, this will boost all skills attack power by 15%. Now this also requires a quest completion as well, unfortunately, which you can start here on the map. There will be another link below for those of you who need it, although I'm sure a lot of you have probably already done Alexander's questline already. Now next up, I'm running the Ritual Sword Talisman. Maybe a little controversial, but I wouldn't run this if you're not very good at the game or you do tend to take a lot of damage, but for those of you who can dodge decently, this can be great. So what it does is it raises your attack power by an extra 10% when you are at full HP. So it will work as long as you are at full HP, and it can help dish out a lot of damage early in the fight. Super strong if you have a mimic or a summon to take that aggro, and of course you can always heal up mid-fight to regain the perk if you've taken damage during the fight. Now this is one of the easiest talismans to get your hands on in my opinion. You're just going to travel to the Lux Ruins right here on the map, and you're just going to kill the enemy in there. It'll be in the chest at the back of the room. Now lastly, for the talismans, I'm running the Millicent's prosthesis, which boosts your dex and your damage when you land successive attacks. So this means hitting the enemy constantly can boost your damage up an extra 11%, and it will also raise your dex up an extra 5, which would take mine up to 85. Now to get this, you will need to kill Millicent. Now the earliest you can do this is by killing the Godskin Apostle near the Windmill Heights, and then killing her at the Site of Grace. Now killing her anytime after that will also drop it, unless you complete her questline when you have to protect her at the end. If you've done that, she won't drop the talisman at all, and you will have to start a new game plus, or you can just join the Discord link down below, and maybe someone will drop it for you. Now if you are really high level, higher than I am in this video, being 150, you can just go and swap out some of these for something else. Maybe the Wearer Heirloom, since the dex boost is a little useless when your natural stats are already so high. Other options is you could use a charm to boost your elemental damage depending on what grease you're going to take with you. More on that later. But an example could be using the Fire Scorpion charm with the fire grease against Radagon, for example, or you could use a Lightning Scorpion charm with some lightning grease against Godfrey. Now the best part of this build is you can change up little things like that, but you get to keep the core aspects of the build the entire time without having to switch up your main weapon or your main strategy. Now of course I can't leave out the Flask and the Tears. These can also be whatever suits your strategy or the particular boss you are going up against. Just like the charms I mentioned, you could use elemental boosting Tears, but if you want something you could use with absolutely everything, the two I'd recommend are the Thorny Cracked Tear, which gives you an increase of attack power up to 20% after successive attacks, and then I would run the Green Burst Crystal Tear for that boosted stamina recovery speed. Now Thorny Cracked Tear is dropped by an avatar very late game unfortunately, but it's all the way up here on the map, and the green burst crystal tier can be found very early in the game, just in K-Lead by killing the avatar here on the map. Now let's go crazy and enhance this even further. So the Blood Boil Aromatic, if you aren't abusing this perfume item, I don't know what to tell you. It can be crafted very cheap with the Perfumer's Cookbook 2, which you can find on a corpse on the rooftop of the Shaded Castle, just here on the map. Now the Blood Boil lasts for 60 seconds, which isn't that long, so you want to drink it last, and it boosts damage negation by 25%, it increases your max stamina by 20%, and it increases all physical damage by 30%. Now that's an insane buff. I don't know why you would neglect this. Go and get it. Now lastly, an extra buff you could add on top of it is Golden Vow, an incantation you could cast if you had a seal as well as your melee weapon. Now this will improve damage by a further 15%. I don't use it in any of this gameplay in this video, but if you have access to it, then I do highly recommend it. You can grab this at the Corpse Stench Shack at Mount Gelmir. Now let's go and talk about the elemental part of this build. Now I mostly used the word elemental because it sounds cool, but in actuality we're just utilizing any status effect to our advantage, so that includes things like bleed, poison, lightning, fire. And not only do these look really awesome on the weapon, but you will be able to exploit any enemy's weakness with just this one build. This is when Google and the wiki will become your best friend, as you do need specific ingredients to craft each grease, and you'll want to know which grease counters each enemy type and boss. And the greases you can make and apply to your weapon are the Holy Grease, Fire Grease, Rot Grease, Dragon Wound Grease, Magic Grease, Lightning Grease, Soporific Grease, and the Blood Grease. Now if it interests you, there are also Drawstring Greases, which basically double the effect of the normal grease, but for half of the duration. It is worth it in some occasions where the boss doesn't have as much total health, but for the most part I prefer the normal ones. Now I used the example earlier, but a good example of using grease to my advantage was Radagon, who has a fire weakness. Fire Grease combined with the Fire Scorpion Charm was super strong in that fight. Now my least favorite part, let's do some maths. So for our dex, we started at 75 and we did receive a +5 from our Prothesis Wearer Heirloom, and then we'll receive another +5 after successive attacks, which gives us a permanent 80 dex and the occasional 85 dex mid-fight. Now for damage, we get a +15% buff from the Shard of Alexander, we get a +10% buff from the Ritual Sword Talisman when at full health, a +11% from the Prosthesis when landing hits, +20% from the Thorny Cracked tier, +30% from the Blood Boil Aromatic, and then finally a +15% from the Golden Vow for a total damage increase of 101%. Now on the left you can see the raw naked damage of my level 150 character, and on the right you can see it once I've activated all of the buffs. Now for those concerned about Golden Vow, the recent 1.09.1 patch should have fixed all the issues with incantations not applying buffs. And that's it guys, thank you so much for watching the video. These videos are a lot of fun to make and I hope you enjoy using these builds as much as I do. This one in particular I think is a perfect blend of really strong and super enjoyable. Now please consider liking if you did find it helpful, enjoyable, or informative, and subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Big thank you to all my supporters, have an amazing day everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.